Thank you very much, Alvin. It's a pleasure to be here today and talk a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing for the last few years in an effort to try to get some varieties out for use with this system. As Alvin has said, I agree very much that this is a very important step moving into the future as a companion system for the Clearfield herbicide-resistant system, which has been an outstanding system for us. You know, for the first time in more or less the history of the world, with Clearfield rice, we could selectively eliminate weedy rice, red rice, whatever you want to call it, from a commercial rice production field. In Louisiana, this probably was more important than just about any other state because, unfortunately, because of some of the ways that we have been growing rice through the years, some of our initial seed sources, the fact that we have actually been in mechanized rice production for quite a bit longer than some other areas. Red rice was a bigger problem for us overall than perhaps it was in some of the other rice producing regions. Through the work that was initially done by Dr. Tim Krogan, this was actually the first Clearfield mutant that was isolated in his mutation breeding program. And from that, we could again, all of a sudden, control red rice in a rice field. And this technology really took over production, certainly in Louisiana, but throughout the southern U.S. rice growing areas. As Alvin said, the first introduction of Clearfield rice was in 2002. And the first couple of varieties that we had out there were CL121, and we had another variety, CL141. It was also grown to a limited extent. And again, the first hybrid introduced for use with the system was CLXL8 from Rice Tech. The CL121 was based on, quote, the first generation mutant. It was not as resistant as the mutant that we're using today, but it did prove to be a good introductory variety to allow us to use this system. So just kind of to give you a snapshot of how important this technology has become in the southern United States. In 2012, we were up to almost 60% of the total acreage in the southern states being grown to Clearfield pure line varieties and hybrids. We've seen over the last few years somewhat of a reduction in that acreage. Some of this is economic. Certainly, at least on paper, the Clearfield system appears to be a more expensive system. At the end of the day, it might really not be that might not be the case. But some of the reason we have seen this downturn in Clearfield technology is Alvin alluded to. We've got some fields out there, having grown Clearfield rice for the number of years we have, that our ability to control weedy rice has just kind of disappeared. And you know, this was the expectation when the weed species that you're targeting is actually the same genus and species as a commercial crop, you're going to have outcrossing. And it's been a combination of the gene moving into weedy rice. We do have some issues with some dormant carryover seed from some of the lines that are grown. Bottom line is we've got some fields out there where Clearfield rice is just not as effective as it should be. So the new system is going to be extremely important. This is just kind of a list of the Clearfield varieties that have come out of the program in Crowley. Since the first varieties, we've put a lot of time and effort into developing Clearfield varieties because this technology is so important to the industry. And actually, it's not only important in the United States. these are a list of, or this is a list of the countries where clearfield rice today is commercially produced. And again, because of outcrosses, because of dormant hybrid seed, at the end of the day, we got wheaty rice that has the resistance gene, and we can no longer as effectively use this technology in a lot of these fields. And this is a shot Alvin was showing to some of Dr. Webster's research earlier. This is a shot of a field in this test area around Esterwood that he was talking about. 2 shots of New Path followed by a shot of Beyond. And this is a commercial rice, and this is wheaty rice. So again, probably a pretty vivid example, but an example of a field where we just can't use clearfield technology anymore. Because it is so important, because stewardship and herbicide rotation are important, it's critical that we get another herbicide side of action for the future of red rice and wheaty rice control, and grass control in general. And understanding that when we do have 2 systems that can be rotated, we're going to prolong the technology of being able to control red rice into the future. I'm not saying that, you know, we're not going to develop wheaty rice that has both genes. We will. But having 2 technologies that we can rotate, certainly, and coming in with a rotational crop such as soybeans is going to be very, very important here as well. But having the new source of resistance is going to be extremely important for us. And we have been putting a lot of time and effort, again, over the last handful of years into coming out with what we hope will be the first Provisia varieties. And this just shows that again, this is from some of Dr. Webster's work, kind of following up some of the photos that Alvin showed earlier. We can, with Provisia technology, go into a field where we've got a lot of wheaty rice that has the clearfield gene and do a very effective job of controlling. And again, just a repeat of some of the treatments that Eric used in this long-term study. So again, a Provisia field, very good control, a clearfield field with essentially very, very little control. So kind of just a review of our breeding history with this technology. The Provisia line was a mutated line. It was an induced mutation that we received in 2012. It was not the line that this mutation was in was an indica. It was a long grain, but it was a tall pubescent line. It did not have cereal chemistry similar to what we grow in our long grains here. So above and beyond just making crosses and getting this into something that was agronomically sound, we also had to spend a lot of time working with Dr. Winfrieda at the Rice Station, who does our cereal chemistry, to make sure that the lines we were advancing did have the proper cereal chemistry. We made our first crosses in the summer of 2012. We grew F1s in the greenhouse, and we really began putting a lot of time and effort into accelerating the development of these lines. And we're able today to be talking about having something that has the potential to be commercialized because of our Puerto Rico winter nursery. These lines, we went through Puerto Rico, in many cases, 2 generations each winter. So again, we can't overemphasize how important the winter nursery was in the work that we're going to be talking about here. We did the first yield trial. It was actually on an F4 line in the summer of 2014. We identified lines after that yield trial to be sent back to Puerto Rico for additional purification. We were able to do multi-location, a limited number of locations because of a limited amount of seed in the summer of 15. We also began hetero purification in the summer of 2015. And after the summer of growing season of 2015, we identified 2 lines that were, again, our initial candidates for hopefully being the first Provisia pure line varieties. Just a shot of some of our yield testing. In this case, this was this past summer. So this is Rick Zonbreaker that used to be in the breeding lab. He's actually making crosses right here, making a cross. Rick is in the audience, and he has been instrumental in this. Couple of years ago, Rick took over our foundation seed program and has done a very good job, has worked very closely in trying to get us where we are today. Again, this is just a shot of us planting our breeding rows on the research station at Crowley. And this is just a typical breeding nursery. What you can see out there is about 6,000, I guess that's about 12,000 rows of breeding lines, which is just kind of how we go through segregating generations, and in each generation make selections and eliminate most of this material, but then the lines that are selected we will advance in future generations. Just a shot of how we plan our yield test. This is actually one of our off-station locations in Vermilion Parish. This is just a shot of our initial Provisia trials we had in 2014. And as I mentioned, these lines were F4 lines, which is extremely early for going into yield testing, especially when you consider that these crosses were made between this indica type and several of our predominant varieties in advanced experimental lines. So as you can see, and as you would expect, some of these entries out here still look pretty wild, and believe me, they were. So after we selected the 24A and B lines, this is Mr. Larry White, who was in charge of our foundation seed program for many years. This is about a week before he retired. He went down to Puerto Rico, and we actually shipped this drill down there, and he planted the 2 lines. I think that it was about at a 6 and 8 pound seeding rate, and kind of helped us take care of these through the year. Again, it's under 10 pounds. I don't remember exactly what the seeding rate is, but that's not a bad stand for that seeding rate, especially in our nursery down in Puerto Rico. We did have successful production of seed down there. This is a 3300 combine that one of the other experiment stations had on the island. And fortunately, when we went down to harvest, we brought Mr. Glenn Scheck-Snyder, who runs a shop at the station at Crowley. And this combine was actually owned by a cowpea researcher. And I had seen the thing 6 months earlier, and I said, well, we're going to have to make this work. It was a mess when we got down there. Glenn spent about 3 days rebuilding this combine, actually almost put a new table on it. In fact, after we used it and it got shipped back to the researcher, the cowpea researcher, he sent me an email. He said, "Thank you for rebuilding my combine. You can use it anytime you want in the future." Anyway, it did save our life because we don't have a combine down in Puerto Rico. So we brought this seed back to Crowley. Those of you that are familiar with the Reichs station, this is our south form, and this is the A line. we had the A and the B line right across the turn row from each other. And this is a result of Mr. Zonbreaker's work, and he did a great job with these lines this year. They were not that pure. I'll just put it that way. Rick spent how many man hours out there in these lines? Just a lot. And a lot of time and effort with Rick and a lot of other people, and he was able to purify the A line, do a very good job with it. So agronomically, it does have the cereal chemistry that we need. And again, we talked about the A and the B line. For 2 or 3 reasons, we have decided to go with the A line right now. We're just going to go with this one line. We're probably not going to go with the B line, primarily for some cereal chemistry and grain appearance reasons. We did produce foundation seed of the line. It is cleaned as we speak. This is just a field shot, and you can see this is seed that actually came back from Puerto Rico. It's got a lot of off-taps in it, and it really should, because for a line like this is still very early generation. So this just illustrates, you know, what Rick had to deal with and the people that work with him in cleaning this material up. We do think it does have the agronomics to be an introductory variety with this technology. This is averaged over several locations, and from a yield standpoint, it's not quite what our best pure line in conventional or clear field lines, but we think it is going to be competitive. It's fairly similar in maturity. It's fairly similar in height. It does have a smooth leaf. It's not pubescent. You know, we talk about rice quality, especially the last 6 or 7 years. We've been talking a lot about chalk and the quality aspects of rice because of a lot of the things we got going on in the industry. So we really looked hard at chalk in selecting these lines. And working with Dr. Ord, our hybrid rice breeder, who is also in the audience, we have an image analyzer. It's called a Winseedle machine. And what you do is you put milled grains on a glass surface, actually takes a photograph and can calculate the amount of chalk in that sum total area of grain. And you know, you can see 111 is considered one of our higher quality lines, 152 in Mermentau as well. The PVL line has about a third of the chalk of these higher quality lines. So from that standpoint, we think it's going to be a very high quality line. This is, it's not a real good photograph, but this comes directly off the Winseedle machine. And you know, CL 151 has a lot of chalk. It's not our best quality variety from that standpoint. You can see it illustrated in this image. 111 is much better. Chenier is much better as well. But you can see how good the Provisia line looks from this characteristic. And the other thing you can see here is the grain length. Our millers really are adamant that they need long grains to have above 7 millimeter grain length. And this is actually the probably of anything I've even considered releasing. The 24A line comes in at almost 7.3, 7.26 grain length, and that's by far the longest grain length of any long grain I've ever had in my program that's gotten this far from the standpoint of a potential release. We're able to turn some seed over to Dr. Dustin Harrell this year. He put this line in his V/M trials at several locations, as well put it in seeding rate studies at the Rice station. Dustin, as you know, looks at a number of nitrogen rates, looks at single applications as well as split applications. And this is, what some of Dustin's numbers look like. It looks like it's going to be fairly typical of our semi-dwarf, somewhere between 150, maybe getting closer to 180 pounds. I'm probably going to err on the side of the 150 because even though this line is a semi-dwarf, it's not immune to lodging. Dustin also had this in seeding rate trials this year. I think about 3 locations. You can see the various seeding rates and this is actually measured in seed per square foot, and basically kind of varies from 10 to 90 pounds of seed per acre. So, and it's not surprising, this is pretty typical of most of our long grain varieties. Somewhere on the order of 10 to 15 seed per square foot kind of seems to optimize yield. Dr. Ord is also working with the Provisia lines in his hybrid breeding program, and he has a number of test crosses, one of them of which look pretty good this year. And I'm not saying we're anywhere close to having a Provisia hybrid, but Dr. Ord is making progress in this area. And hopefully within just a very short period of time, we'll be talking about Provisia hybrids as well. I do want to recognize the important people at the Caffey Rice Research Station. A number of them are in the room here today. People like me get up and get the opportunity to talk about research, but this only comes about because of a lot of dedication and hard work by a lot of people that work with all the research projects at the Rice Station. Our field day, again, is scheduled for Wednesday, June 28th. And we'd certainly encourage you to come be with us on that day. And with that, we'll entertain questions for both of us here this morning. And if not, we appreciate your attention. Thank you very much.
And sign up for the CCA if you want it in the back.